Growing up with a narcissistic parent is a subtle, silent kind of training in the art of reading people. From a very young age, children in these homes learn to observe, interpret, and predict moods as a way to survive. They quickly understand that a smile may hide anger, a compliment may mask criticism, and silence can signal disapproval. Over time, this constant vigilance becomes second nature, a finely tuned radar for human emotion. They develop an almost instinctive awareness of others' feelings, often noticing micro-expressions, changes in tone, and subtle body language cues that most people overlook. This heightened sensitivity is not just a social skill. It is a necessary adaptation to navigate an environment where their own needs are consistently ignored or devalued. They become highly attuned to the emotional landscape of those around them, sometimes even anticipating moods or reactions before anyone else is aware of them. While this ability can be incredibly powerful, allowing them to empathize and connect deeply with others, it also comes at a cost. Because they spend so much energy focusing outward, they can lose touch with their own emotions, often struggling to identify or articulate what they truly feel. The constant attention to others' states can create a persistent internal tension as the child balances the desire to be seen and loved with the reality of a parent who may never offer unconditional support. This skill of emotional awareness shapes their relationships well into adulthood. Children who have grown up in narcissistic households often excel in environments that require social intelligence, negotiation, or conflict resolution. They are sensitive listeners, perceptive friends, and thoughtful colleagues, able to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics with remarkable skill. Yet, the same awareness that allows them to understand others can make them highly self-critical and anxious in their interactions. Because they have learned that feelings can be manipulated or weaponized, they are cautious about vulnerability, sometimes doubting the authenticity of others' intentions. They may become chronic people pleasers, adjusting their behavior to prevent perceived tension or disapproval, often at the expense of their own needs. Their empathy, while a gift, can feel like a double-edged sword. It allows them to connect deeply and offer genuine support, yet it can also leave them emotionally drained and unsure of where their feelings end and someone else's begin. Learning to recognize and value their own emotional experience becomes an essential part of their personal growth. Over time, many come to see this heightened sensitivity as both a strength and a challenge. The skills developed in childhood provide them with the ability to navigate social complexities, build meaningful relationships, and respond thoughtfully in difficult situations. At the same time, they must confront the emotional patterns instilled by a narcissistic parent, learning to balance empathy with self-care and awareness with personal boundaries. Understanding the origins of this trait helps them reclaim their emotional identity and transform a survival mechanism into a source of resilience. When they integrate their perceptiveness with self-compassion, they not only connect more authentically with others but also learn to honor their own feelings, creating a foundation for healthier, more balanced relationships throughout life. Children of narcissistic parents often carry with them a relentless inner critic, a voice that quietly but persistently questions their worth, choices, and abilities. From a young age, these children are exposed to a parent whose love and approval are conditional, where praise is rare and judgment frequent. Every mistake can feel monumental, every misstep scrutinized, and every achievement overshadowed by comparison or belittlement. Over time, the child internalizes this constant evaluation, creating an internal dialogue that mirrors the parent's critical voice. This inner critic is not merely self-doubt. It is a pervasive presence that can influence decision-making, self-esteem, and the way they perceive themselves in the world. They may find themselves second-guessing actions, replaying conversations, and endlessly questioning whether they are enough. Even accomplishments that others recognize as significant can feel inadequate because the inner critic measures them against impossible standards, often the same standards set by a parent whose love was never unconditional. This internalized voice is powerful, shaping personality, behavior, and emotional response patterns well into adulthood. The impact of this inner critic extends beyond self-perception to influence relationships and professional life. Adults who grew up with a narcissistic parent may struggle to assert themselves, fearing that their thoughts or feelings will be judged or dismissed. They might experience perfectionism, overworking themselves to gain approval or to avoid criticism, often feeling exhausted despite outward success. The inner critic can make them highly conscientious and detail-oriented, but it can also breed anxiety, indecision, and avoidance of risk. Interpersonal interactions can become challenging because they may overanalyze reactions, assume negative judgments where none exist, and struggle to accept praise without feeling undeserving. They learn to internalize responsibility for outcomes beyond their control, often carrying unnecessary guilt or shame. Understanding the roots of this inner critic is essential because it allows them to differentiate between messages learned in childhood and their own authentic self-evaluation. Healing this internalized judgment requires patience, reflection, and conscious effort. Recognizing the presence of the inner critic is the first step in reclaiming emotional autonomy. By intentionally challenging these negative messages, setting realistic expectations, and practicing self-compassion, they can gradually quiet this relentless voice. Therapy, journaling, and supportive relationships can provide mirrors of validation and truth that counterbalance the distorted judgments internalized from childhood. Over time, the child who once relied on a parent's unpredictable approval can learn to trust their own voice and instincts. They can develop self-awareness that is discerning rather than critical, allowing them to navigate challenges without being weighed down by internalized judgment. The inner critic, once a source of limitation, can transform into a guide for thoughtful reflection and growth rather than fear and self-doubt. Children of narcissistic parents often develop an extraordinary sense of self-reliance and independence. In households where love and attention are conditional, where needs are ignored, or where support is inconsistent, these children quickly learn that they must rely on themselves to survive. From a young age, they become problem solvers, caretakers of their own emotions, and sometimes even mediators of their parents' moods. This self-reliance is not merely a choice, but a necessity. It equips them with practical skills, resourcefulness, and the ability to handle challenges that might overwhelm others. They become adept at thinking ahead, anticipating difficulties, and finding solutions without depending on external help. However, while this trait can lead to remarkable competence and resilience, it often comes with a hidden cost. The very independence that protects them as children can later create barriers in relationships, as they may struggle to ask for help, delegate responsibilities, or trust that others will support them without hidden motives. The skills that once ensured their survival can paradoxically lead to isolation and overextension as adults. The influence of a narcissistic upbringing on self-reliance goes beyond practical skills. It shapes their inner narrative and perception of control. Because their environment was unpredictable and often manipulative, they learn that relying on others is risky, and that disappointment or betrayal can appear without warning. Consequently, they cultivate a mindset of accountability, where they take full responsibility for outcomes and rarely leave room for external assistance. This can manifest as a strong work ethic, decisiveness, and an ability to manage multiple aspects of life simultaneously. Yet the same mindset can also contribute to a reluctance to form deep, trusting connections. Relationships may be approached cautiously, as they balance the desire for closeness with the fear that vulnerability could be exploited. Learning to temper self-reliance with trust is a gradual process, requiring recognition that needing help does not equate to weakness, and that interdependence is a natural, healthy aspect of human connection. Over time, many who grew up with narcissistic parents transform their self-reliance into a source of empowerment rather than isolation. They channel it into personal growth, professional success, and resilience in the face of adversity. With conscious effort, they learn to distinguish between situations that require independence and those where collaboration or support is beneficial. Developing boundaries, seeking reliable allies, and allowing others to contribute can strengthen relationships and reduce the stress of carrying burdens alone. This balance between independence and trust becomes essential for emotional health, enabling them to maintain the strengths cultivated in childhood while addressing the vulnerabilities that resulted from a lack of dependable support. When properly integrated, self-reliance transforms from a survival mechanism into a strategic advantage, allowing them to navigate life with confidence, competence, and an understanding of the value of both autonomy and connection. Children of narcissistic parents often carry a complex duality, a strong craving for approval combined with a deep-seated fear of criticism. From early childhood, their actions and words are constantly evaluated against shifting standards set by a parent who is difficult to please. Praise is rare, fleeting, or conditional, while disapproval is frequent and sometimes unpredictable. As a result, these children develop a heightened awareness of judgment, learning to anticipate reactions and adjust behavior to gain fleeting validation. They become highly attuned to social cues, carefully monitoring facial expressions, tone of voice, and subtle body language. This sensitivity allows them to achieve success in social and professional settings, as they can read situations with remarkable accuracy. Yet beneath the surface of competence and adaptability, a tension persists. Even when recognized for accomplishments, they may struggle internally to believe in their own worth, constantly comparing themselves to impossible standards set by the critical parent. The desire for approval and the fear of disapproval become intertwined, shaping not only how they interact with others but also how they view themselves and their achievements. This duality can influence relationships and decision-making for years into adulthood. Individuals who grew up with narcissistic parents often pursue validation in work, friendships, and romantic relationships, seeking reassurance that they are enough. At the same time, fear of criticism or rejection can make them hesitant to take risks, voice opinions, or fully express themselves. They may overanalyze interactions, questioning whether their actions were appropriate or if they have disappointed others even when no negative judgment exists. Their drive for approval can motivate exceptional achievement, social grace, and professionalism, yet it can also create anxiety, self-doubt, and chronic stress. The paradox is that they may appear confident and self-assured outwardly, while internally navigating a constant balancing act between wanting acceptance and fearing judgment. Understanding this pattern is essential for personal growth, as it allows them to recognize that their worth is not contingent on external validation, and that fear of criticism can be managed rather than dictate behavior. Healing this internal tension involves cultivating self-validation and learning to separate genuine feedback from the distorted messages internalized from a narcissistic parent. By practicing self-compassion, setting boundaries, and acknowledging personal accomplishments without comparison, they gradually shift the focus from external approval to internal acknowledgement. Therapy, reflection, and supportive relationships can provide mirrors of authenticity, showing that they are worthy without needing to meet impossible standards. Over time, they learn to maintain ambition and social sensitivity while letting go of excessive fear of judgment. The duality of craving approval and fearing criticism transforms from a source of tension into a tool for insight, emotional intelligence, and balanced self-expression. This understanding allows them to engage with the world more confidently, maintaining empathy and discernment while cultivating a sense of self-worth that is resilient, independent, and grounded in reality rather than conditional approval. Children of narcissistic parents often develop intense people-pleasing behaviors as a direct response to their childhood environment. In a household where love and attention are conditional, these children quickly learn that compliance, accommodation, and anticipating others' desires are ways to avoid conflict or rejection. They become highly skilled at reading social cues, predicting what others want, and adjusting their behavior to meet those expectations. This ability can make them appear thoughtful, considerate, and socially adept as they navigate interactions with precision and care. However, This people-pleasing tendency often comes at the expense of their own needs, desires, and boundaries. Their focus on satisfying others can lead to emotional exhaustion as they constantly monitor and modify their behavior to gain approval or prevent criticism. Over time, this pattern can become deeply ingrained, shaping not only their social interactions, but also how they perceive themselves, often linking their self-worth to how well they meet others' expectations rather than valuing their own identity. The people-pleasing behavior that emerges in childhood carries profound effects into adulthood. These individuals may prioritize the comfort, happiness, or opinions of others over their own, sometimes sacrificing their goals or preferences in the process. They may take on responsibilities beyond their capacity, overcommit themselves to projects, or avoid expressing disagreement for fear of disapproval. While this makes them dependable and empathetic partners, friends, and colleagues, it also leaves them vulnerable to burnout, resentment, and emotional imbalance. The underlying pattern is rooted in survival. The child who learned to adapt to a narcissistic parent's unpredictable moods is now an adult who adapts to avoid conflict or maintain acceptance. Recognizing this behavior as a learned survival mechanism is critical because it allows them to understand that people-pleasing is not an inherent flaw, but a response to early experiences which can be consciously adjusted over time. Breaking free from chronic people-pleasing involves cultivating self-awareness, setting boundaries, and valuing personal needs alongside those of others. Therapy, self-reflection, and supportive relationships can help individuals identify when they are overextending themselves or compromising their authenticity. Learning to say no, express preferences, and prioritize personal well-being does not diminish empathy or care for others. It strengthens the capacity for balanced, healthy relationships. Over time, they can retain the sensitivity, social intelligence, and attentiveness developed in childhood while releasing the compulsion to constantly adapt at the expense of their own identity. What was once a necessary survival strategy transforms into a conscious choice, a measured responsiveness to others without losing sight of one's own voice. In this way, people-pleasing evolves from a mechanism of control imposed by a parent into a skill guided by intention, self-respect, and balance. Children of narcissistic parents often struggle with understanding their own identity, a challenge that begins early and can extend well into adulthood. In homes dominated by a parent who imposes their values, desires, and expectations, the child learns that their own thoughts and feelings are less important than pleasing or conforming to the parent. Over time, this repeated pattern creates confusion about who they truly are, what they value, and what they want from life. The child's sense of self becomes intertwined with the parent's perspective, making it difficult to distinguish authentic desires from conditioned responses. They may find themselves constantly asking, "Is this what I really want, or am I doing this to gain approval?" This inner uncertainty can result in a persistent feeling of being lost or disconnected from their own identity. It also impacts decision-making, goal-setting, and personal fulfillment, because choices are often filtered through the lens of anticipated judgment rather than intrinsic motivation. The struggle with identity often manifests as inconsistency or adaptability that is more about survival than genuine self-expression. Children of narcissistic parents may adopt different personas in various settings, tailoring behavior, opinions, and even values to align with expectations of authority figures, peers, or partners. While this adaptability can appear as social intelligence or versatility, it can also erode their sense of authenticity. Over time, they may experience frustration, indecision, or dissatisfaction because the life they are living does not fully reflect who they are internally. Relationships, careers, and personal goals may feel unfulfilling, even when externally successful, because these accomplishments are often guided more by learned approval seeking than by personal passion. The dissonance between their internal self and outward behavior can create anxiety, confusion, and a lingering sense of incompleteness, making self-discovery a crucial and sometimes challenging journey. Healing and reclaiming identity involves consistent reflection, self-compassion, and the courage to differentiate personal desires from learned expectations. It requires asking intentional questions about values, interests, and motivations, and experimenting with decisions that prioritize authentic expression rather than external approval. Supportive relationships, therapy, journaling, and introspective practices can provide the mirrors necessary to see oneself clearly, free from the distortions imposed by a narcissistic parent. Gradually, the child who once relied on external validation can develop a stronger internal compass, gaining confidence in their preferences, decisions, and personal goals. Over time, this process allows them to integrate the valuable skills learned in childhood, such as adaptability and awareness of others.